So Kamaru Usman versus Gilbert Burns has now been cancelled for UFC 256, where it was supposed to be happening at the end of the year in December. Gilbert Burns versus Kamaru Usman will now be looking to take place in January or February of 2021, since Kamaru Usman pulled out with an injury. Well, he didn't really pull out. The fight was never officially announced, actually. The fight was never officially announced. It was just rumoured to be taking place at UFC 256 and in the works for UFC 256. But I'm assuming that it's something along the lines of Usman still hurt his nose from the Jorge Masvidal fight. He thought it was going to be okay. He took a jab on the nose in the gym, realised it might not be okay. I'm going to need another month or two for this nose to be okay before I head back into hard sparring rounds. That's okay with me. Kamaru Usman is now off the card with Gilbert Burns. They'll be doing that in early 2021. It actually makes sense for the end of the year to now be a bit more open, because we've got a bunch of guys right now that want to fight. Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier, Tony Ferguson versus anyone at our disposal right now as well. Michael Chandler is going to be looking for an opponent soon. There's a bunch of people. Jorge Masvidal versus Colby Covington. There's so many big names looking for fights right now, and it just seemed a bit silly to book up those pay-per-views in the first place with championships that you can't put big names over on a card, because you have to have championships as the main event. And if you have champions on the same card as someone who isn't a champion, it's going to bring all the money in. The champions are going to earn money from pay-per-views they haven't sold themselves and just cheat the system, basically. So the UFC doesn't like putting big names on the same cards as champions, because it doesn't really work that way, because the champions have to be the main event. That's just always how it's been. But still, I feel as though they might move Amanda Nunes versus Megan Anderson just a couple weeks back into January, stay on the same card as Usman versus Burns. I mean, Amanda Nunes is a big-name champion. Kamaru Usman is a big-name champion, don't get me wrong. But they're not quite big enough names to where they mean anything to the UFC. Like, they're still small enough names among all of those fights that are taking place where they're still under the UFC's command. There's a certain level of fame that you can get to where you can kind of be like, okay, fuck the UFC. I don't have to do what you tell me. I'll book whatever card I want. I'll go on this card, and if I don't want to go on that card and fight that guy, I don't have to, and you'll come crawling back to me with a better bit of paycheck the next time around you offer it. There's a certain level of fame like that. Usman and Amanda Nunes are not champions of that level. They will do as they're told. So I wouldn't even be surprised if Usman isn't even injured and the UFC just wanted to find a way to move this event backwards, because now it seems like McGregor and Poirier really want to fight each other. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't be surprised if Poirier versus McGregor was taking place in December. I wouldn't be surprised if Masvidal versus Covington was taking place in December either. But this card is moving back to January, and I thought right now, before anything else in this video, and I say before anything else, we've rambled for 3 minutes, we're going to get into what card should this be moved to in January. A lot of people like my little card builders, so I'm going to go through a card that I have built specifically for this moment right now. Amanda Nunes versus Megan Anderson might stay on the card in December, so I haven't put them on this card in January. January 16th, UFC 257, Kamaru Usman versus Gilbert Burns. Now, January is a time of the year that no fighter wants to fight in whatsoever, because that means they have to go through a training camp in Christmas, in New Year's, in Thanksgiving in America as well, which I'm assuming is around that same area of time in the December period. But still, that's a time that no fighter wants to fight through. Doing a camp and cutting weight through Christmas is something that no one would ever want to do in their right mind, and I don't blame fighters for not wanting to go there. But there's a level of fighter that you can put on these cards that will say yes. And I'm going to read you this card right now, and I think this is very possible. Kamaru Usman versus Gilbert Burns as the main event. Co-main event, Weili Zhang versus Rose Namajunas. Okay, there aren't really much Christmas celebrations in China. Okay, that's just how it works. And Rose Namajunas will probably find some kind of spiritual awakening of starving herself of Christmas, and the aura of her chakra will grow, and she'll shave her head again. Who knows? Also on the card, so the main event, Usman versus Burns. Co-main, Zhang versus Namajunas. Co-main and main event done. Feature fight of the card, Yoel Romero versus Derek Brunson 2. Brunson will do anything right now for a jump up the rankings, and Romero's fighting for his job. Desperate times equal you're fighting in January. Thank you very much. Moving on, Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Tatiana Suarez. I think this fight has been known to happen ever since Jędrzejczyk lost, because she's not retiring. I know she said she was retiring, but then she also hinted at a bit of a comeback in 2021. It would make sense for that fight to happen. And also it would make sense because Tatiana Suarez would have a fight booked, or we'd be talking about matchups for Tatiana Suarez. She isn't fighting anyone, and we're not even talking about her, and the UFC isn't even talking about her. So I'm assuming they know that they have a fight with her, with Joanna Jacek, sorry, and I think that should be on this card as well. It would tie some relevancy into the women's strawweight belt to have Zhang versus Namajunas and Jacek versus Suarez on the same card. That's the card so far. Usman Burns, Zhang Namajunas, Romero Brunson 2, Jacek Suarez also on the card to open up the main card of the pay-per-view. Johnny Walker versus Ovin St. Preux. This is a January pay-per-view. I would love to go crazy, but I'm thinking logically, how can I make a real nice card? And that's what we've came with. Walker versus Ovin St. Preux will round off our main card, and I think it's amazing. On the prelims, though, and here's where we get raunchy, because I think all good pay-per-views come from their prelims. If you look at all of the good pay-per-views that we've had before, the prelims have really done it justice. UFC 244, if you remember, had great prelims. UFC 251 was let down by the prelims as well, if you'll remember. Those prelims weren't too good, but 244... some of the best prelims of all time, and look at these prelims right here. Donald Cerrone versus Nico Price 2, the rematch. They've already agreed to January, okay? So we win. They don't have to even get shifted over in a bad spot in January. They have to go for it because they said they would. Donald Cerrone versus Nico Price will headline the prelims. Roxanne Modafferi versus Alexa Grasso will also take place on the prelims. Daniel Rodriguez versus Miguel Beza will also take place on the prelims. Devin Clark versus Jamahal Hill on the early prelims. Julian Erosa versus Kai Kamaka, Veronica Macedo. Get a lube, versus Shayna Young. And then you've got Maki Pitolo versus Alan Abadovsky opening up the entire card. Loser goes home. They're in desperate situations as well. I like it, very much so. That's the card overall. Usman Burns, Zhang Namajunas, Romero Brunson 2, Jacek Suarez, Walker St. Preux, Cerrone Price 2, Modafferi Grasso, Rodriguez Beza, Clark Hill, Erosa Kamaka, Macedo Young, and Pitolo versus Amadovsky. Take my fucking money that I don't pay you because I have a brain and I use streams. Good stuff, man. That's a good card, but I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in December, really. That's the big question about all of this. I would like it to be Masvidal versus Covington. I would really, really like it to be Masvidal versus Covington. That would be ideal. I would also very much like it if it were McGregor versus Poirier. I would do anything for it to be McGregor versus Poirier as the main event and Masvidal Covington as a co-main. That's what I would really like. And maybe on that card I just read you, slide Amanda Nunes on there because I don't give a fuck about Nunes in December. Let's be real. Before December UFC 256, and I want this to be very clear, if I was the matchmaker, this is what honest outlook I would have on my cards that I have built. If I was a UFC matchmaker and I just saw that Usman versus Burns has been moved off UFC 256 and it currently has Amanda Nunes versus Megan Anderson as its main event, I would look at UFC 255 and I would say, oh dear God, we can't give them two absolute fucking dumps of cards back to back. So we're going to have to do something major here in UFC 256. And I think McGregor versus Poirier, didn't they agree on the exact date of December 12th anyway? Didn't they agree on December 12th anyway? Just randomly, December 12th. And it just so happens to be the exact same date as UFC 256. Poirier versus McGregor 2. Make it happen. Or McGregor versus Poirier, because McGregor beat him, of course. McGregor versus Poirier 2. Make it happen. If McGregor beats him, no one will care if he gets a title shot because it will be earned. And Poirier will probably have to fight one more person because the UFC hates people sometimes. But that's just how it works. Tony Ferguson's also there. And if he wins a fight, it'll be very big. But I think what you should do, and this would be my immediate plan of action to save the UFC at the end of the end of 2020, sorry, it's not UFC 2020, they don't own their fucking calendar system, but still, if I was looking at November, and I was looking at that card, you know what I'd do? I'd just, for the meantime, have Figueiredo Perez, have Shevchenko versus Maia, but also get the Ferguson fight on the card, because remember what they did not too long ago, I believe it was, I don't even know what UFC card it was, but Cejudo was fighting Moraes, I want to say UFC 238, but I don't think it was UFC 238, but I think it actually might have been UFC 238. It was UFC 238. Henry Cejudo versus... I should have just trusted myself! Henry Cejudo versus Marlon Moraes was a good card. Shevchenko versus I on the undercard as well as the co-main event. So what they did, they added Tony Ferguson versus Donald Cerrone on short notice to up its pay-per-view numbers, and it worked. So let's try it again. Ferguson versus someone, or just a huge name versus someone in the feature fight. Ferguson will probably fight anyone in the feature fight at UFC 255. Ferguson versus Chandler in the feature fight. Shift Figueiredo Perez and Shevchenko Maia up. They'll get residual fans just because everyone's tuning in to watch Ferguson throw down. And I can't wait. Do that on that card. And then shimmy over Yan versus Sterling on UFC 256 with a good main event above it with some really big names, and then just say that, Yan, you don't get any pay-per-view points. I don't really mind if someone takes over the lead spot of a pay-per-view. I don't care, okay? Don't have Yan and Sterling, I guarantee you this as well. If you asked Petr Yan and Aljamain Sterling, listen, you get to fight as the co-main event of a McGregor versus Poirier 2 card. You're going to earn the same amount of money as you would for a championship belt, but we're just not going to make the belt on the line. They would probably say yes. Okay, Aljo would probably be very upset about it, but I reckon he would eventually come round and say yes, because they would like to fight on a McGregor card. Put the belt on the line, no one cares, but I understand. So maybe don't do that and shift Yan versus Sterling into January as well and make it an even bigger card, who knows? But yeah, it's just an interesting bit of news, you know? Yeah, I was a little bit hyped up about that. I don't know how I got so hyped up about Usman being injured. Maybe it's just that Usman... maybe it's just because I don't like Usman. I just like the thrill of knowing that he's injured and hurt, you know? Maybe it's something like that. But still, I just find it funny that he's out of a fight because of a self-inflicted nose injury. I swear Masvidal didn't even... it wasn't even from Masvidal's punches. I'm pretty sure it was from his head grinding against Masvidal against the cage, which is hilarious. But now Gilbert Burns is going to have a bit of a better chance, and this changes those things. Like, to know that Kamaru Usman is getting himself, and I said this in Woodley versus Covington, Usman will now have enough time. Burns will have more time. Differences, you know? So it's going to be very interesting to see them both throw down. But yeah, cool. I just felt like I wanted to talk about the whole situation right now. And fuck off Khamzat Chimaev, you ain't getting a top 5 opponent. Just at the end of the video, just to make sure I've just solidified all the possible dislikes I could potentially get. And, yeah, just don't get a top 5 opponent. You should definitely be fighting someone along the lines of Alex Oliveira, who's top 30, you know? And he isn't even top 30. He is top 35. That's the level we're talking, okay? Maybe a Tony Martin. Maybe a Sean Brady. Maybe a Gunnar Nelson. I don't know. They wouldn't do... Gunnar Nelson would never do that. But still... I don't know why I've turned this into a Khamzat Chimaev thing. I was talking about fighters that I dislike right now. I don't actually dislike Khamzat Chimaev, contrary to popular belief. I just don't like the way people perceive him. That's the only thing I'm annoyed by. There's not really much to be annoyed by about Khamzat Chimaev. He says like 3 fucking words. You know, it's hardly like I'm offended by him. He says he'll smash UFC fighters. Ugh. But still, like and subscribe. That's the welterweight division recap based on Usman pulling out against Gilbert Burns. You're welcome. Goodbye. Click that button up there. And toodle pip. Good day.